So what we're working on now is we're going to find centerline from front to the rear of the plane because we need to figure out what that centerline is. We're going to find out if it does have any kind of warp left or right. There's not much we're going to be able to do about that now, but we can adjust for some of that stuff with the foam covering and the fiberglassing, so I'm not super worried about it being 100% plumb. We do want to get it close for sure. We definitely need to figure out centerline though, so we can figure out what perpendicular is for the tail, because that's coming next here pretty quick. So that tail section back there, I'm actually gonna have to cut the back plate and actually build a wedge for it to make sure we can do this properly. So let's get rolling on this.
Here I am grabbing a ball of yarn or twine I think it was, and getting that rolled off. So right there I already have pre-marked the center line in the front of that. I have it tied in a nice solid knot. Ran it through the back through the empty webs, the hollowed out webs that are in the back half of the plane, all the way to the very tip top of that tail, which has also already been marked off. So at that point, I tied it off, and here in a moment, you'll see me clamp that. Right now, I'm still confirming center line at the top and through all those webs, just to make sure I'm dead center on this. And then as you can see, I clamp it on the back there, nice and tight, to make sure that I can't miss that. And part of this whole project is to find the center line, is to figure out perpendicular. So you can see me messing with some of the 5-foot brackets I have to figure out if the tail is plumb or not, or how I'm going to adjust that. So I'll talk about that here in just a moment.
So it definitely has a slight warp to it, but we're talking 1/8 inch maybe, bowed out to this size. So this is a little wider out than that, but maybe 1/8. It's not perfect. It's not terrible. It's definitely not perfect, but I'd call it acceptable personally. So we're gonna figure out center line from front all the way to the tail, because right now I trace that all the way back to that rear tail for center line. Match the 2 points, and that's what we're gonna use as our point of reference for the actual tail itself. So let's get it.
So let's just add that curve that is in the fuselage. Another reason I'm not super concerned about that 1/8 of an inch that we're off, which is still pretty darn good, is this whole thing is getting wrapped in foam, well, plywood, then foam, cut to shape appropriately, and then covered in fiberglass. Sorry, took me a second there. So I'm going to be able to finish the final shape of that fuselage pretty well. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that 1/8 inch, not super off on affecting my weight and balance. So right here you can see that crossbar, I centered it up, and then I'm using that as a point of reference to figure out exactly how square it is. So you can see me tying it off on the very end, 1 inch from the end of the tail piece to that center line at the top front. And then I'm going to yank that off, compare it to the other side, and measure. So that's the whole process that I used for figuring out how square those were.
So I used a piece of twine on that cross member to figure out square, using that point of center line as our base for center line. I centered up that 5-foot long width, which is technically needs to be a 6-footer, but we're not talking about that right now. I just wanted to see how square and true it was. Well, I just looked. So from far corner to center of front, to far corner center of front, we're talking the right-hand side is 1 inch shorter. So this angle, wingtip to tip, is 1 inch shorter. I'm going to run the math and see what that percentage is, but that might not require any kind of modification. If that's the case, score! Now I just got to check square of the rearmost, because I know that one's not straight. So that's next.
So now I'm messing with the rearmost tail, which is most definitely, if you're looking at the actual panel, is definitely not flush to the rear. So from here you can see me measuring the tape measure, confirming all my dimensions, and making sure everything is right, which is important, obviously. But after I get those confirmations, I started kind of messing with that with a clamp. That square, obviously, the speed square gets utilized, and thankfully I have a bunch of extra wedge material from the various projects that have happened with this airplane, so I'm wedging them in there and using that to get as close as humanly possible. As it turns out, as I'm sitting there staring at it, looking at it, as you can see, I found out that the rear face of the actual frame, so maybe not that webbing piece, but the frame itself, that is actually, interestingly enough, plumb. So that one is squared off of there. So now I just need to add a piece that's back there that'll actually handle the alignment, and then I just need to put together a wedge to make sure that that rear tail piece, spar piece, will actually be in line properly. That process shouldn't be completely terrible to do either. I think I got a basic wedge already kind of set up and squared away. So now it's just a matter of when we're ready to start working on the tail, cut it, put it together, glue it in place, call it good.
They are even, they are level, and they are square to center line. That's what we're looking for.